Hello, good evening, and welcome back. So, good news, hopefully, that there won't be tax hikes anytime soon, as expected, in order to pay for all the handouts from the COVID money. But instead, in order to try and balance the books, there'll be a decrease in foreign aid, which is a very misleading name anyway. It's just throwing money at a problem that you're not really resolving. As the Daily Mail reports here, Rishi Sunak is warned tax rises should be delayed for 2 years to prop up the economy amid claims the £15 billion foreign aid budget pledge could be axed to help fill a huge black hole in government finances. And when they say tax rises, that's also a misleading term. It's tax rates. You cannot predict a tax rise, but you can implement and predict and state a tax rate increase. They are very different. Just because you tax people at a higher rate, it does not mean you get a higher revenue from tax. As is fully understandable through communism, of course, if you take things to the end point, that if you're taxing everybody 100%, you're not then earning a greater tax revenue. So then you'd look into the Laffer curve and decide on where exactly that is correct in discerning what rate of tax should you implement in order to get the highest return. But nonetheless, that is the nomenclature they wish to use. So there are claims Rishi Sunak is considering axing government's foreign aid spending pledge. Legally, 0.7% of national income, up to £15 billion, must go on aid every year. Government is scrambling to find ways of filling hole in finances after lockdown. So, the 0.7%, the legal requirement, is something that shouldn't be in law in the first place, really. It just seems to be British government just hamstringing itself with quite possibly the best of intentions. The idea of that is to virtue signal, to show other countries that you're a good country and therefore worth doing business with. And also the idea is that you're helping those other countries develop, and therefore you're going to have preferential treatment because you're investing in them instead of just giving them aid. And the first part falls down because why would anybody else care? And the second part falls down because it isn't an investment, it is just aid. You're not entirely sure where the money is going, and we've seen it thrown away on dance groups in previous years, for example. But if you are going for investments, then clearly China has a better way of investing than Britain does. Not morally better, of course not, but they do see a better return on their investments because of debt trap diplomacy, which is saying that we will loan you this money, and then you'll either pay it back at this rate of interest, or we will take your land. And it's called a debt trap because the idea is that the country will never be able to repay the debt, in which case it's just a land acquisition. That's the point. So, yes, they have a better way of doing things from an investment standpoint. Also, just like we see with anything, that if you give somebody something, it's not worth nearly as much as if they earn it for themselves. You can see this in socialised housing or socialised health service, for example, and council houses, where if somebody doesn't earn what they receive, then they're not going to take very good care of it. So, instead, if you incentivize people to have a chance to receive what they earn, instead of it all being taken from them, then you give them a much better incentive in order to do better, and therefore that country or that person or that society is going to improve at a much greater rate. Instead of just throwing money at them, when the first problem is you don't know where that money is going if you've got corrupt dictatorships, which, let's face it, you mainly do if it's a poor country, because that's why it got poor in the first place. And secondly, they're not going to really have any care about what they're going to do with that money, because they know that there's always going to be more coming, and they don't need to worry about taking care of themselves, because instead they're going to be reliant on you giving them the money. So it doesn't help from that perspective either. So we are very grateful to the IFS for stating that you do not need to be raising taxes because, as they say, we're at a very tentative time at the moment. As they say, it would guarantee a much deeper recession. Large parts of the economy are still fragile. We need to nurture it, not throttle it. And of course, if you are taking a greater proportion of people's income or revenue or profit, then they're going to be less likely or less willing to stay within the confines of your country, and they're more likely to leave because there just aren't the opportunities here, because you're taking the opportunities from them. And sure, we can all go to America again as yet another revolution of English people getting sick with English law and thinking that they need to do a better job in America, by all means. But I don't think anybody in Britain in a position like Rishi Sunak would actually want to see that happen, because then in the end it does hurt them as well. They would rather have reasonable power over a very successful country than total hegemonic power over a shithole, because that reflects on their state of living as well. Also, last thing to point out about foreign aid is what makes you think you can help somebody else out if you can't help yourself out. Just like Dr. Jordan B. Peterson says, clean your room, because if you can't even keep your own room in order, what makes you think you can get the world in order? And it's the same thing here, that if you cannot get your own country in order as functioning and successful, then what makes you think that you're able to help out another country? So, don't. And no, we don't need any white guilt or British guilt, if you will, because now we're too multicultural. What you've got to decide is, are you going to be giving these people money forever and you're just going to be the benefactor? Or instead, are you going to encourage them to develop their own skills, reach self-actualization, and become good in their own right? And then maybe they will be able to trade with you in the future instead of just being reliant on you and not having a life worth living. Just like in any parental circumstance as well, that at some point the children have to grow up and you have to give them those opportunities and let them do that. Otherwise they'll always be reliant on you, and we all know that that doesn't end very well. So, the good news is, as it stands, it seems like we won't be having a hike in tax rates, because if we do, it's not going to help anything. Our tax rates are already pretty damn high, so trying to bring them up any more will be incredibly detrimental, and I do not recommend that whatsoever, unless you want yet another brain drain and more capital flight. But as always, let me know what you guys think down below. Always intrigued to hear what you guys have to say. And as always, until next time, have a good one.